Napoleon Bonaparte, a man of destiny, forged in the crucible of war. As cannons roar and the battlefield trembles beneath the weight of history, we are drawn into an epic tale of a man whose name becomes synonymous with conquest and power. This is Napoleon, Fall from Grace. Napoleon Bonaparte, born in Corsica in 1769, would go on to become one of the most influential figures in European history. His early years in Corsica were marked by the island's struggle for independence from Genoese rule. However, Napoleon's destiny would lead him far beyond the shores of his birthplace. According to the article entitled Napoleon and the Age of Nationalism by Hans Kohn, the young Napoleon was not a French nationalist even when he was in military school in France, but rather a passionate Corsican nationalist. Corsica had been conquered by France in 1768, and Napoleon resented the French as oppressors. As a boy, Napoleon idolized Pasquale Paoli, who had led Corsica's fight for independence against France. When Napoleon entered French military school, he still felt like a foreigner and was mocked by the other students for his poor French. His main passions were for his Corsican homeland and heroes like Paoli. When Napoleon received a commission in the French army, his thoughts were constantly on Corsica. He wrote that he would gladly sacrifice his life to liberate Corsica from French rule. So, what changed for Napoleon? The French Revolution inspired him to shift his nationalism from Corsica to France. Rather than Corsican liberty, he now embraced the revolutionary cause in his vision for remaking France and Europe. Napoleon sensed the enormous energy and dynamism unleashed by the revolution, and he sought to harness this force. According to the article, political liberty soon came to have as little meaning for Napoleon as did nationalism. He used the rhetoric, or democracy and popular sovereignty, when it served his purposes, but denied the people any real voice in governing. Once in power, Napoleon had little use for nationalism unless it aligned with his imperial ambitions. He created and dissolved new states constantly, as strategic needs dictated. Napoleon gave encouragement at times to notions of Italian or Polish nationalism, but never seriously pursued national independence for them while he ruled over Europe. It was only after his final defeat at the Battle of Waterloo that Napoleon constructed a legend that he intended to promote the liberty of nations all along. But the facts show, as Kohn argues, that his decisions were dictated by changing strategic needs. Unifying Europe under his rule took precedence over nationalist aspirations. One of Napoleon's biggest failures when it comes to nationalism, as well as in economic stability, was his continental system. Uniting all the territories he conquered under one and only one source of trade proved detrimental to the overall French economy. The Napoleonic Wars from 1792 to 1815 had a major effect on Europe's economy just on its own without the continental system being a player. As historian Francois Creuset states in his journal article, these wars took place at a crucial stage of economic development, and their impact was quite serious. Still yet, Napoleon's continental system, despite its shortcomings, played a crucial role in shaping its economic landscape of Europe during the Napoleonic Wars. It was even said Napoleon himself smuggled in goods that he couldn't even get from the continental system. Now the question is why the continental system was even established. Why the continental system was established boils down to mercantilism and power plays by Great Britain and France combined. The idea was to block trade from continental Europe to Great Britain to harm the Britain economy, but the British still found ways to smuggle goods in, so it ultimately failed and really only hurt France. Specifically, the author notes that among the victims were of course shipbuilding and industries such as sail and rope making. Even more damaging was that the most important casualty was the linen industry, which lost major markets in the Americas. Speaking of the Americas and shifting our focus from nationalism and the continental system, there was a slave revolt happening during the Napoleonic era that caused great alarm to Napoleon. Saint-Domingue was France's most prosperous Caribbean colony due to its production of sugar, coffee, and other commodities under a brutal plantation slave system. Inspired by the French Revolution, an uprising began there in 1791, led by enslaved Africans seeking liberty and equal rights. A new colonial order emerged led by Toussaint Louverture, himself a former slave. Louverture revived plantation agriculture, using forced labor while trying to maintain autonomy from France. In 1801, he drafted a constitution for the colony that abolished slavery permanently. This alarmed Napoleon, who sent forces in 1802 led by General Leclerc to subdue Louverture and reimpose slavery in French control. Fierce resistance by Louverture and other black generals like Jean-Jacques Dessalines defeated the French expedition. Disease also decimated the French troops. As the journal noted, the French would learn what the British already had, that there was a difference between subduing the coast and ruling the interior of this extensive island. By 1803, Napoleon realized he could no longer re-establish a profitable slave-based colony in Saint-Domingue. This ruined his plans for Louisiana as a granary to feed the Caribbean colonies, as he had envisioned that Louisiana would provide the colonies with provisions, cattle, and wood. Facing financial and military reality, Napoleon decided to sell all of Louisiana to the United States. Few figures in history have captured the imagination like Napoleon Bonaparte. The military genius who crowned himself Emperor of France left an indelible mark on Europe and the world. When Napoleon died in exile on the remote island of St. Helena in 1821, those around him scrambled to preserve his image for future generations. With photography still in its infancy, a plaster death mask was made of Napoleon's face. From this, several prototypes were cast. Only 4 of these Napoleonic death masks exist today. They offer us a glimpse of the actual facial features of this larger-than-life figure. The strong brow, small mouth, and neat chin are recognizable as Napoleon even decades and centuries later. His Napoleonic code formed the basis for legal systems across Europe. His military innovations transformed the art of war, and even in defeat and confinement on St. Helena, Napoleon's epic story and flawed genius continued to fascinate the world. For all his ambition and ego, Napoleon was still mortal. These masks are reminders that behind the myth was just a man. This is the conclusion of Napoleon, Fall from Grace.